Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The moment our eyes met in the hallway that morning, something shifted. It wasn't just a glance, it lingered, long enough to feel it. A flicker of surprise in his eyes, followed by the faintest smile. Quick, fleeting, but not the kind you give just anyone. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of every sound, every movement. Afternoon sun spilled through the windows, warming the tiled floor of the bathroom. I thought I was alone. I was certain I'd locked the door. I needed a moment to release tension, to forget the lines we tiptoe around. The hum of the toy, the rhythm, the breath I was trying to keep quiet. My eyes were closed, mind drifting, lost in sensation, until I heard the door click open. I froze. He stood there, his eyes wide, caught between guilt and fascination. He wasn't supposed to see this. But neither of us moved. His gaze dropped, then slowly came back to meet mine. My breath hitched. And in that second, I knew. This wasn't just shock. It was a line crossed by accident, or maybe not. A moment neither of us could take back. And something in the air between us changed. The silence after that moment in the bathroom lingered longer than it should have. We avoided each other at first. He stayed in his room. I busied myself in the kitchen, but the tension never left. It followed us. In the quiet pauses, the missed words, the way our eyes would meet and hold just a beat too long. One evening, the air thick with late summer heat, I reached for a glass from the top shelf. He stepped beside me without a word, his hand brushing mine as he passed it to me. I muttered a quiet, thanks, not looking at him, but I could feel his eyes on me. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. "Yeah, just tired," I replied, but we both knew that wasn't the truth. He didn't move away. He stood there, close enough that I could feel the warmth from his skin. My breath caught when I turned, and we were face to face. His eyes dropped to my lips, and I saw his hand twitch slightly, as if he wanted to reach out but didn't. We both stepped back at the same time, like a spell broken, but not really. The pull between us was still there, stronger than either of us wanted to admit. Later that night, we crossed paths again in the hallway. He was heading to the kitchen, I was walking to my room. The hallway was narrow. We both paused. "I'll go," I started, stepping aside. He hesitated, then smiled softly. "You can go first." I passed him slowly. As we brushed shoulders, I felt it again, that spark, that heat. Neither of us spoke, but the air between us buzzed. He turned back before I made it to my door. "About the other day," he began. I stopped. "Yeah." I didn't mean to walk in. But I can't stop thinking about it. My heart thudded. "You shouldn't say that." "I know," he said, stepping closer. But I had to. We stood inches apart. His hand moved like he was going to touch mine, then pulled back. I didn't stop him. I didn't move away. Instead, I leaned in, just slightly. Barely enough to notice. But he noticed. And just before we parted, his fingers brushed mine. Not an accident. Just enough to make my skin burn. Just enough to leave us both wanting. The days that followed were quiet, but not peaceful. Every shared space felt charged, like the air was holding its breath. I'd catch him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. And when I looked back, neither of us turned away. The guilt came in waves. He was my stepson. This wasn't supposed to happen. Every instinct told me to pull back, to keep things normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. One evening, the power flickered out from a summer storm. The house fell into a hush of candlelight and rain tapping the windows. I was in the living room, curled under a blanket, when he walked in holding 2 mugs of tea. "You looked cold," he said, setting one beside me. "Thanks," I murmured, trying to ignore the flutter in my chest. He sat on the other end of the couch. Not close, but close enough. The flickering light made shadows dance on his face. We sat in silence, the kind that wasn't awkward, just heavy. "It's been weird lately," he said suddenly. My heart skipped. "Yeah, it has." He looked at me, and I looked back. "Too long." Again. Do you think about it? He asked softly. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't lie. Yes, I whispered. The rain outside felt distant compared to the sound of my heartbeat. He shifted slightly closer, our knees almost touching. My fingers brushed against his as I reached for the mug, or maybe his brushed mine first. I wasn't sure anymore. Do you think it's wrong? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard. I think it should be. But it doesn't feel that way. I looked at him. There it was again, that pull, that undeniable force drawing us in. He reached up, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His hand lingered for a second longer than it should have. I didn't stop him. He leaned in slowly, eyes locked on mine, waiting for any sign to stop. His breath was warm, our lips inches apart. I felt it, the moment everything was about to tip over the edge. But then, the front door creaked open. We froze. The storm had passed, leaving the house washed in a pale, moody light. Every sound felt sharper, the ticking clock, the distant drip from the eaves, even the faint rhythm of two people breathing in the same space. They hadn't spoken about what almost happened. But silence had its own kind of language. He lingered near the kitchen doorway, one hand on the frame, eyes searching her face. She was sitting at the table, pretending to read, but her gaze hadn't moved down the page for minutes. You couldn't sleep either? He asked. She shook her head. No. It's too quiet. He walked closer, slow and careful, as though afraid to break something fragile in the air. The chair beside her scraped softly when he pulled it out. For a moment, neither spoke. Her fingers trembled when she reached for the cup of tea. He noticed and smiled, a small, nervous thing that somehow made the tension stronger. You're shaking, he said. It's just cold, she whispered, though the room was warm. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, close enough that she could see the reflection of candlelight in his eyes. Every breath seemed louder. Maybe we should talk about it, he said quietly. Maybe we shouldn't, she replied. But she didn't look away. There was a long pause. Then, almost by instinct, his hand brushed hers. Neither pulled back. Time slowed, heartbeat, breath, everything drawn out in that single, suspended second. I don't know what this is, she murmured. Me neither, he said, but it feels impossible to ignore. She looked at him, their faces close enough that the space between them seemed to hum. Then, just before either could say another word, a sound outside, a phone buzzing somewhere distant, broke the spell. They both exhaled, reality rushing back in like a tide. The morning after the storm, the house looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Every word between them carried the weight of what almost happened. Every glance lasted too long. Every silence said too much. She tried to act normal. She made coffee, opened the curtains, and let sunlight spill across the kitchen. But it didn't wash away the memory of how close they had come. Then came the knock at the door. It was Mark, her husband, his father, back early from a business trip. She froze for a moment too long before opening the door, and in that hesitation, he noticed something. You okay? Mark asked. Of course, she said quickly. Just didn't expect you home yet. Her stepson had appeared in the hallway, stiff as a board. He mumbled a greeting, and Mark looked between them, unaware of what lingered beneath the surface, but sensing something had shifted. The rest of the day was a blur of polite conversation and forced smiles. She avoided eye contact. He stayed quiet. But when Mark left again for an errand that evening, the air between them grew thick once more. In the kitchen, they stood across from each other, words caught in their throats. We can't keep doing this, she whispered. I know, he said. But I can't stop thinking about you. Don't, she said, almost pleading. It's wrong. Then why do you look at me like that? She wanted to deny it, to push him away, to erase the pull that had already taken root. But denial felt heavier than truth. You remind me of something I lost, she said finally. Something I shouldn't want back. He took a small step closer, unsure but unwilling to stop. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Outside, the sky dimmed, painting the room in amber. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. A message lit up the screen, a name that made her stomach drop. "I know what's going on," it read. Her breath caught. "Someone knows," she said softly. He moved closer. "Who?" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter. It's over." But as she turned away, his hand brushed hers, and she didn't pull back. Their eyes met, full of fear, longing, and something too powerful to name. "We shouldn't," she whispered again. "I know," he said, voice trembling. "But I can't pretend anymore." For a moment, they just stood there, caught between danger and desire, loyalty and longing. The air itself seemed to wait. And then, just as she opened her mouth to speak, he took one last step forward, the distance between them gone. The screen fades to black. The night was quiet again. Too quiet. But this time, there was no storm outside, only the storm inside both of them. She stood in the hallway, arms crossed, leaning against the wall as he approached. Neither spoke for a moment. The silence wasn't awkward anymore, it was loaded. "I can't do this," she said softly, eyes fixed on the floor. "I'm trying to be better than this." "I know," he replied. His voice was hoarse. "But I'm not sure I want to be." She looked up sharply. His honesty hit her like a wave. "It's not just tension anymore," he continued. "It's not just want. It's something else. Something I didn't expect." Her breath caught. "Don't say that." "Why?" He stepped closer. "Because it's true?" The nearness made everything blur. Her heart pounded. She could smell his cologne, feel the heat between them. Then, slowly, she reached for his hand. "I'm scared," she whispered, "of what this means." He held her hand tighter. "Me too. But I'm more scared of pretending I don't feel it." Their foreheads touched, eyes closed. The walls they had both built began to crumble. Then a sound from upstairs. Footsteps. A door creaking. They froze. She pulled away first. "We can't do this here." He nodded. "Then where? When?" She looked at him, eyes full of something new, not just desire, but sorrow. "We either end this now, or we change everything." The weight of those words sank in. And still, neither moved away. This wasn't just about attraction anymore. It was about crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and deciding if what they felt was worth the fallout. His voice was barely a whisper. "Would you change everything?" She didn't answer. She kissed him once. Brief, quiet, electric. And then she stepped back into the shadows, leaving the question hanging in the air. The morning light crept through the curtains, washing everything in soft gold. The world outside moved on, cars, birds, ordinary life, but inside the house, everything felt changed. Neither of them spoke for a while. The night before lingered not in touch, but in thought, in what was said and what wasn't. The kind of silence that feels full, not empty. He sat by the window, eyes on the faint mist rising from the yard. She stood behind him, arms folded loosely, studying his reflection in the glass. There was no need for words. Both knew they had reached the edge of something that couldn't last. Finally, she spoke. "What happened? It can't happen again." He nodded, slow, resigned. "I know. But I won't pretend it didn't mean something." Her eyes softened. "It did. That's what makes it hard." They shared a small, bittersweet smile, the kind that says goodbye without saying the word. For a moment, she reached out, her fingers brushing his shoulder. A simple gesture, but filled with everything they couldn't say aloud. "You'll understand someday," she whispered. He turned to look at her. "Maybe. But I'll remember you, just like this." She smiled faintly, turned toward the light, and walked away. No dramatic exit, no final embrace. Just quiet closure. Outside, the sky cleared, sunlight spilling across the lawn. He stayed there, letting the warmth reach his face, breathing deeply for the first time in days. The memory wasn't painful, not anymore. It became something else, a reminder of how fragile boundaries are, how human hearts stumble, and how even a fleeting connection can change everything. The story ended not with passion, but with peace, a soft surrender to what was and what could never be. And as the screen faded to black, a single line lingered on the screen. Some stories don't need forever, just a moment that feels real.